Okay, we are finally starting the Defenders and the Punisher this time, so let's get to this. We'll start off with episode 1 of the Defenders, the H word. I initially thought that H would mean help, but it turns out H probably means hand. Anyway, we open up in Cambodia with Danny Rand and Colleen Wing coming to the aid of some man in an alley who's been stabbed. They are fighting this unknown hand ninja. Spoilers, it's Elektra. Yeah. It doesn't help, too. It's like if you're trying to not spoil Elektra's return and you go to the Netflix episode summaries, and the third episode that's right there at the top of the screen, first line in says, Elektra. Good job. Anyway, basically as the guy is dying, he says, Danny, you need to go to... He knows Danny's the Iron Fist. He says, you need to be in New York City. We then go to New York City where Jessica Jones wakes up hungover, naturally. She meets up with Trish Walker, and Trish is constantly trying to get Jessica to sell her story to news organizations and try to earn something of some sort of income, but she really doesn't care. We then go to CK Penitentiary where Luke Cage is being freed. Foggy Nelson, it turns out, is his lawyer. Like I said, it's not... It's sort of implied, but yeah, I'm guessing the evidence that turned up to free him, well, turned up. So, that's okay. Claire was waiting in New York for him when he gets back. Anyway, Matt Murdock is preparing for a case, but he's also kind of fighting the urge to be Daredevil at this time. The law firm of Nelson and Murdock is broken up. Karen Page is now working for the New York Bulletin. And that's where that is going. And as this is happening, a woman named Alexandra, that's played by Sigourney Weaver, discovers that she's dying. She's aware that she's dying. She goes to a hospital, basically confirm what she suspects, and she knows she needs to get things done. Back with Jessica, she takes the case of a missing architect, only to receive a phone call telling her not to take that case. She eventually manages to track the phone call and realize it was actually from said architect and that he's been hiding something, which we'll get to when we get to there. Back with Luke and Claire, Misty shows up at Claire's apartment and sort of fills Luke in a little bit on what's been going on in Harlem. Mariah is basically in charge, but she and Shades are laying low. They're not doing anything to attract a lot of attention to themselves. But what has been happening is there's been murders of young men in Harlem who were working as couriers for someone, but they're not really connected in any other way except that they all got these new jobs and then suddenly they were killed. Anyway, it turns out Alexandra is part of the Hand because she's working with Madame Gao. In fact, Gao is more of an underling, so... as much as I love Sigourney Weaver, I had to wonder the dodgy situation now. We have the evil Japanese ninja clan being run by an American woman. A white woman, to be more precise. Yeah. Good thinking. I mean, you were already catching enough crap for, possibly whitewashing with Iron Fist, even though that character is white in the comics, but... yeah, I don't know where they were going with that. Anyway, Alexandra says we need to initiate the big plan now. Gao is sort of uneasy about it, but does what her boss is telling her to. Anyway, Jessica, like I said, tracks the phone number of the person who called her, discovers it's in an apartment that was rented by the architect. She goes in and she finds a massive stack of C4 explosives. As this is happening, Danny and Colleen are returning to home, and New York is suddenly hit with a massive earthquake. Centered in Hell's Kitchen, Matt feels it and starts going crazy because immediately afterward, panic begins to break out in the streets. As this is happening, Elektra is taken before Alexandra, who assures her something. It wasn't very well explained, and that's pretty much how the episode ends. And that takes us right into episode 2, Mean Right Hook. Matt eventually gives in to the temptation and inserts himself to take down a couple of looters. the next morning, Trish Call gets a walk from a geologist who says, yeah, what happened was not an earthquake. This is not a shallow level fault line earthquake, because that should be, even deeper than it was. This was much closer to the surface. And then suddenly the phone call gets cut off, and Trish is basically told by her higher-ups to not talk about this ever again. Misty arrives at the apartment that Jessica Jones was investigating because Jessica called in the C4. Jessica not so covertly swipes some evidence from there and tries to track everything down. This actually winds up attracting the attention of Jerry Hogarth, who points out that, Hogarth points out that, because this guy had all this explosive stacked up, that he's now on the FBI terror watch list, and if Jessica continues trying to pursue this man, bad things could wind up happening. Anyway, as this is happening, Danny and Colleen return to Colleen's dojo. Colleen thinks that they're probably going to need some help, that they need to try to find some help to take down the Hand, and Danny basically, he sort of half-heartedly says, okay, we'll try to look for some. And, let's see here, anyway, Gal then reports to Alexandra about a wall that had markings from Kunlun that couldn't be torn down, and she basically says, look, this wall, it's not a wall, it's a door or a gateway. You need to find the way through. That's what Alexandra says. Anyway, Jessica, okay, Luke, as this is happening, goes to a seedy bar to wind up pumping Turk for some information. Turk points him to an underworld figure named Whitehead. Luke kind of follows Whitehead and finds again, another courier thing about to break down, except he recognizes one of the couriers. Turns out that this courier had a brother who was a courier, and he's also the brother. Both of them were brothers to Candace, the woman who turned evidence to free Luke Cage and put Mariah in jail, who then got killed by Shades at the season finale of Luke Cage, so that's what happened there. Anyway, Danny and Colleen go to visit a swordsmith shop because they recognized a sword that the guy was carrying, that the guy in Cambodia was carrying. And so they go to investigate that, and they find a whole bunch of bodies of people in garb. It's not entirely sure. I believe this might actually be members of the Chaste, who are Stick, that's Daredevil's mentor's organization. However, inside the room there's also designs from Kunlun. On the wall there's a wall scroll with it on there, with a picture of Kunlun on there. Danny and Colleen then go into hiding because a hazmat team has showed up to pick up the bodies, destroy the bodies, basically. Turns out, though, that the hazmat team are actually the couriers that Luke has been tailing the whole time, and like I said, turns out that as this is happening, Colleen and Danny are fighting them off, and that's where they bump into Luke, and Danny and Luke encounter each other, and they wind up fighting briefly. Luke drills, Luke is basically impervious to all of Danny's attacks, that is, until Danny hits him with the Iron Fist and sends him into a wall. As this is happening, Jessica returns to her office/apartment to find her neighbor Malcolm being held hostage by the architect she was looking for. The architect basically asks Jessica, is she working for them? Is she working for them? She doesn't understand. At this point, Elektra crashes in and tries to kill the architect, but he eventually ends up taking his own life. As this is happening, Jessica tries to flee the apartment, but Misty Knight is there to arrest her for stealing evidence from the crime scene. It's at this point it's revealed that Alexandra has Stick hostage, and then as Misty is interrogating Jessica at the police station, Matt Murdock arrives to represent her in court. And that's how episode 2 ends.
Incredible! A fly the size of a battleship! That flying menace has to be stopped! Come into my web, said the Spider-Man to the fly.
And for saving our city, I'm giving you this medal and a cash award of 400.
Pardon me. Yes, Spider-Man. Frankly, I'd rather have an orange.
Spider-Man loves oranges. Eat fruit. Snack smart.
Now, the most successful comic book series in history is on home video. Marvel Comics' X-Men, a heroic band of mutants. They do what must be done, and they do it with style. X-Men, a 30-year tradition that Polygram Video is proud to offer in this exciting collectible series of action-adventures, featuring the characters you've grown to love and admire as they do battle with the forces of evil. Keep your eyes open for these and more X-Men home video adventures, and team up with the coolest mutant crusaders in the known universe. Now, you can collect all the titles in the original X-Men series from Polygram Video. The one and only X-Men.
How'd you like to win the Ultimate X-Men contest?
I do not believe it.
Well, believe it, because here's your chance to win not only all 12 X-Men home videos and a Marvel comic, but also your own real-life X-Men arcade game.
How about a game of one-on-one?
Sure. Now you can play the full-size X-Men arcade game without ever leaving home.
I'll teach you to invade my universe.
There's more. 250 others will win their own complete X-Men home video library and a Marvel comic. To enter, send a postcard with your name and address to Fox X-Men Home Video Madness, P.O. Box 230, Los Angeles, 90078. Hurry, entries must be in by June 29th, or...
All bets are on.
Okay, moving on to episode 1 of The Punisher. 3 a.m. and he must be lonely. Baby, it's 3 a.m. and he must feel the rain's going to wash away everything he believes. Sorry. Anyway, we open up with Frank going after several members of the people he believes were responsible for his family's death. He takes down a motorcycle gang in Alabama. He then goes after a cartel member in Juarez, Mexico, and he actually shoots him from across the border in El Paso, Texas. He then chokes the guy to death in a bathroom stall with his own tie. And then as that's done, he basically throws away the skull shirt and burns it. At this point, we jump ahead 6 months where Frank is working for a construction company under the name of Pierre Castiglione. And the name Castiglione is actually a reference to the comics. That is actually Frank Castle's real name. Castle is actually a cover name that I believe he changed when he went into the Marines, or he came out of the Marines. Somewhere around that time he did change the name to kind of cover his identity a little bit. Anyway, he's working at a construction site, and a lot of the other workers are kind of... he works weird hours, so the other workers are teasing him about it. In fact, they're not happy about it because he's working... He shows up really early in the morning, and he stays till really late at night, and he's in charge of, like, knocking down walls, support beams, and rebar and stuff like that with a sledgehammer. And they sort of believe him to be... they believe him to... Sorry. They believe him to be physically handicapped, as well as mentally handicapped along the way. Like I said, they tease him because of long hours, means they don't get overtime, because you have to be asked to work overtime, and because he's working overtime without asking, no one will get paid. He also spends time visiting a veteran support group being run by a former squad mate named Kurt, who knows who Frank is, even though he's still Pete Castiglione at this point. He doesn't really participate in the group, he kind of just sits in the background really quietly. Kurt sort of tells him, like, look, the world thinks you're dead, you need to move on, you need to sort of accept how things are going, and Frank kind of, half-heartedly follows that. At this point, we switch our attention to an ICE agent named Dana Madani. She had a partner who was killed in Afghanistan, and it turns out this partner was killed by possibly, well, actually, it's later revealed to be somewhat true that Frank Castle killed this partner believing that he was a terrorist or some sort of turncoat, even though he was really a government agent. Her chief, superior officer at ICE, basically, his name is Carson Wolf, and he's trying to throw her off the tracks. He tells her to drop the investigation, that, no one's really behind her on this, and, she basically finds out something fishy about this guy that's attracting a lot of attention. It turns out, back with Frank, it turns out his co-workers at the construction site, they're doing some criminal activities on the side. They're planning to rob a crime family, the Nucci crime the Nucci crime family's floating poker game to help pay off some debts they actually owe to the Nucci family. And the Nucci reference is a comic reference too. I believe it's from Garth Ennis's Punisher run early on. He faced a mobster named Ma Nucci. Anyway, they sort of wind up, after an accident takes out one of their guys, they wind up taking the junior member named Donnie, who had been sort of buddying himself up to Frank. They wind up taking him along. Anyway, the robbery starts, and Donnie bungles his way through everything. He drops his wallet. Not only drops his wallet in the midst of this, but he drops it in a manner so that all of these mobsters can see his ID. So, yeah. Basically, the guys leave, and they go back to the construction site, and they start beating on Danny with the intention of throwing him into a cement mixer and burying him in cement. But then Frank comes along. Frank's there. He was there working late again, so he comes down. He interferes. He beats basically all of them to death with all but one of them to death with the sledgehammer. He buries them in the cement, and he frees Donnie in the process, giving him the money and tells him to just leave. It's then that he goes after the Nucci family, and he kills all of them. And as he leaves, there's a closed-circuit camera that kind of catches him, and at this point, Frank actually has long hair and a beard. I'm sure you've probably seen that type through the picture up there. But like I say, he has long hair and a beard, but the camera recognizes Frank Castle's walking style, a gait recognition program. And that leads us into episode 2, which is Two Dead Men. It's basically the next morning. Frank is trying to lay low. He goes to a diner for some breakfast. He reads an article about the Nucci murders that was written by Karen Page. Like I said, she's still working for the Bulletin. I don't know where exactly this falls in line with Defenders, because it's outside of being a spin-off to Daredevil, it's not really connected to Defenders at all. But as he is eating his breakfast, he gets a call from someone who knows he's Frank Castle, and he basically says his name is Micro, and he's been helping Frank for a while. He actually gave Frank a disc which shows Frank murdering Madani's partner, and it also revealed that these are the people who are probably actually responsible for the death of Frank's wife and kids. And that happened at the end of Season 2 of Daredevil. Anyway, Micro gives Frank a phone sort of remotely. He kind of lays in the idea that, yeah, he's on this one building, and Frank kind of rushes off to try to see if he can catch him. He goes to the building, but there's just the phone there, and it turns out it was a ruse, and Micro's actually across the street the whole time. But anyway, Frank goes to Kurt to see, does he know who this Micro guy is? He knows what he did in Afghanistan. And again, could this be why... Could Micro basically be behind the death of Maria and Frank's kids? Right. It turns out he also sent Micro also sent the disc to Dinah Madani, sorry, and she somehow misplaced it though, so she hasn't been able to use it to get the dirt that she needs to. Frank manages to get in contact with Karen Page and ask for help in tracking down Micro, who he is. Karen pokes her nose around at the Bulletin, and her editor there basically says, well, Carson Wolf basically told me to lay off. I mean, the one report we got about a guy named hacker named Micro, who was an NSA guy who apparently leaked some secrets, but it was from this really fringy, outside the organization conspiracy guy, so I already wasn't really believing him, and as this happened, Carson Wolf, a high-ranking government agent, told me to lay off the story, so I laid off the story. Like I said, it turns out that Micro was an NSA agent who leaked valuable information and faked his own death, but he actually keeps tabs on his family with security cameras and microphones placed throughout their home. So he's still kind of a part of their lives, not actually being a part of their lives. Frank goes to actually visit the Lieberman home, and Micro gets upset. And it basically is attempts to try to lure Micro out. Micro doesn't completely reveal himself. He chooses to manage to lay low. He does watch from his car, though. But as this is happening, Frank and Mrs. Lieberman actually bond over their grief/guilt of being the survivor of their family and losing loved ones and everything like that. Frank still has his hair on the beard at this point, by the way, but eventually he shaves it off. Frank goes to Carson Wolf's house and jumps him. He wants information on Micro. But he starts torturing Wolf, but Wolf's kind of put on like, dude, I sort of been at Guantanamo. You're not gonna fake me out. I know torture isn't a valuable way to get information. And basically, as he's doing this, he's trying to wriggle free of the tie that Frank used to tie him up. He eventually manages to get the upper hand. Wolf gets the upper hand. And Wolf reveals that yes, he was the one behind the murder of Frank Kessel's family. And he pulls the trigger on Frank's gun only to discover that it was actually empty. Frank grabs him and snaps his neck. As this is happening, Dinah is having dinner with a man named Billy Russo, who runs a military contracting agency called Anvil. It turns out he also served with Frank Castle, but before they can really get into more, she gets a call about what happened to Wolf and has to obviously deal with that. The next day, Micro manages to call Frank, and Frank kind of chews her out and says, look, you put your family in danger twice now. I could have, Wolf could have gone after him, I could have gone after him. This isn't the way to do things. And basically he kind of leads Micro on a wild goose chase of his own, leading to a moment in the cemetery where Kurt actually confronts Micro. And as this is happening, Castle actually slips his way into the back seat, or not the back seat, the trunk of Micro's car, and Micro inadvertently winds up taking Frank back to his compound, and the episode ends with Frank knocking Micro unconscious.
Injustice makes him boil, evil makes him burn, and then Danny Ketch becomes the Ghost Rider. Flameglow Ghost Rider, blaze and vengeance, ride in the name of justice. With whip chains, hidden projectiles, and with flaming discs and a ghost fire gun, they destroy scum like Zarathos and Skinner. If evil makes you burn, ride with new Flameglow Ghost Rider, defender of the innocent. Cycles come with figures, other figures sold separately.
We come from another world.
We come in peace.
To offer you a new way.
A better way.
To build a perfect future for you humans.
We just need you
to embrace change.
Okay, so thoughts on these two shows so far as they've as we're starting off on them. Well, Defenders has some problems. I think there's way too much padding. There was way too much setup. Like, I understand you want to use the first episode for a little bit of setup, but the pace really should have picked up in episode 2, and it didn't. It was pretty flat. Again, like, we're just kind of having them get together at the end of episode 2. That should really be happening. I thought you could have tightened this up a lot better, especially since you only have 8 episodes. The earthquake should have happened in the middle of episode 1. Then the meetup should have happened at the end of episode 1. And then episode 2 should be where everyone finally starts to get together. But no, it seems like that's not going to happen until episode 3 now, possibly even episode 4. It's just way too slow moving. As for the Punisher, well, that's getting a little better off. I mean, stuff is actually happening. I think because, again, outside of being a spin-off of Daredevil, it really doesn't have anything to do with the other 4 shows at all. It's pretty on its own. And because of that, it's allowed to do a lot more, and we can get more of a plot furthering going on through everything. Like I said, you actually get a lot of Frank Castle being the Punisher, which helps. Unlike, say, I don't know, Iron Fist. That being said, I do have a few reservations on it. My ideal Punisher story is he goes after mobsters and low-level street hoods. He doesn't really go after government agencies. That kind of feels a little off. Also, and my ideal Punisher is kind of the Garth Ennis one, where it's like the wacky. Yes, there is some over-the-top action involved into it, but more or less, it's stripped down. It's bare. He doesn't have, access to the battle van and computer access that he really shouldn't have because he doesn't have a lot of money to be spending on stuff like that. I'm not saying it's getting to that point. I mean, hopefully it doesn't. But like I said, as we go into a whole government conspiracy, I just don't know how that's going to turn out. Anyway, I am looking forward to more episodes of these shows, though, so at least that is going for it, especially The Punisher. Next video up should be the Red Sparrow review. That'll be up on Saturday. Let's see, after that, obviously, it'll be the Random Trade review on Lobo. See you all then. Hey guys, is there a movie you want me to tackle? If it's some stinker like Baywatch or the Emoji Movie or something else? Check out my Patreon at Sleepy Time for Cat Productions. See how you can make that happen.